All right, ready to finish it up. Are you happy? I can see the smiles on your face. All right, let's talk about how we're going to finish this up. First of all, do you have any questions for us? I know we went through a lot of information this morning. You've got materials in your handouts. Any questions we could answer for you? Okay. If you want to take the exam, go to the Emergency Management Institute under FEMA. That's their Training and Education Division. And there's the website right there. If you go to it, you'll have to register for it if you're not already signed up. And you just take the test. Within a few seconds of submitting it, you get an email back, say whether or not you passed or failed. If you didn't do so well, you can always take it again and things like that. If you do actually complete it and pass it, they will, within usually 48 hours, send you a link. They'll actually be your certificate. You download the certificate. For your agency, if you want to make, be compliant with NIMS and all that, you should keep a copy of that certificate in your agency folder so they know who's completed the IS 100, because there's 100, there's a 200 class, there's a 700 class, and an 800 class. All of them are available online at the same Emergency Management Institute website, and you can take each of those classes online, get certificates in the same class nationwide. And once you take it, you don't ever have to take it again. So those of us that are a little more mature in this program, we took it when it was like 100, 200, now it's like 100Z, no, it's 100A. But it goes through revisions, but you don't have to repeat the course again. Sir, I see a question.
Well, so we take this and pass it.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
That means that you have now completed this training. Ultimately, there is a federal matrix on what levels of training people have to have. The more responsibility they have for emergency management, the more training they have to have. Line personnel, the first entry line, generally they take the 100 and the 700. And then your organization, your agency is responsible for keeping records of that.
And at that point I can go up to...
Yeah, and then once you take the 100, you can take the 200, you can take the 700, 800, then you understand how the whole system works. Now then, as long as your agency is tied into your local emergency management office, then when they need, they'll call you out, but you'll understand how the whole process works. And so if you take the higher levels of classes, like the 700, the NIMS, National Incident Management, it tells you the entire process for NIMS. The 200, the class above this, a little more in detail information about what happens for when you're staying up ICS, a little bit larger incidents and things like that. And then there's other classes which are 300 and 400, which are only available in a classroom setting, and those are for the upper level management. So if you would like to be at a county EOC, you'd be taking those classes. Does that help? Okay, cool. Any other questions? Okay, I believe you have that in your material, so you can access that anytime you want. So, we have that. Let us now, excuse me, now we've given you all this stuff. What do you do with it? What does it mean? Well, whoa, don't know what that is. Okay, now what we want to do is show you examples of different scenarios that might come up where you would be called in. So we're going to go through a couple of them and explain. What we'd like to do now is actually put this into a format that you understand. Now you've heard all these theories and how it expands and contracts and all that kind of stuff. Now we're going to show how it actually works. And the good thing to remember is there's no one way to do it. Remember, ICS is scalable, it's modular, you only open the sections you need, and you make it work for you. As long as you stay within a few certain guide rules, you can really modify the whole program for whatever you want. So these are examples that you could use, but don't necessarily think that everything you do has to meet this format. Because we'll have a very simple incident, we'll have more complex incidents as we go through them, but don't think that you have to do it this way. There's other ways you can do it. This is just the way we came up with. So let's talk about the first one. What are your organization's response capabilities? You need to be able to identify what you can do, what you can bring to the table to everybody else. So, what's one thing your organization can do? Okay. House animals. Okay, what else? What else can you do? Okay, so you got the transport, and we'll include that with such things as the carriers, the people, vehicles, and all that. You can go get the animals, bring them to where they need to be, and things like that. And housing, let's go ahead and include that, like the food and maybe a temporary foster setting or something like that. So is that pretty much what your organizations can contribute? Okay, so you've got that. So as we think about all these, that's what you're going to do. That's your response capabilities. What's your typical organizational structure look like? We want you to think about that because I think, as Matt pointed out earlier today, day-to-day operations are one thing. You may have a director, but is that person necessarily the most qualified to respond to a disaster or to an emergency? You may have a chief financial officer or a budget person or something like that. Is that person qualified to be the finance and administration section chief? You don't know. But look at the organizational structure and see where you need to modify it for emergency response. And it may be somebody totally different, somebody who typically day-to-day is line personnel, but maybe during emergency, they're the ones that need to stand up and take control. But so look at your daily organizational structure and compare it to what you might need in an emergency. Next thing you want to do is, how are you connected with local, county, state emergency management? Have you gone out and met with them? Have you trained with them? Have you practiced and exercised with them? And if you haven't, then you need to step forward and say, hey, this is what we bring to the table. We can house animals, we can transport animals. I think history has shown us that a lot of people are not going to a shelter, they're not going to leave their home if they don't have someone to take care of their animals. Now, having people remain in danger areas is something emergency management is very concerned with. Can you solve that problem? Yeah. Do most places shelter the animals? Are they going to let the owners come with them? Sure. So can you solve their problem? Yeah. Those are the resources you bring. You give local emergency management the ability to deal with the problem they have. That is, getting the people to evacuate from their home. And I think history has shown us pretty well. So how well are you connected with local, county, state emergency management? Are you actually a registered volunteer with your local or county emergency management? If you are, then large-scale emergencies, you're already covered under the workman's comp insurance and all that because you're an emergency responder for that emergency management agency. And you can do that as a volunteer. But how are you connected with them? And how do you work with them and train with them and things like that? How often do you meet with them? Have you ever? Have you ever sat in one of their training, or every county in the state of Illinois has local emergency planning committees, LEPCs. The LEPCs have to meet 4 times a year. Have you ever met with them so that everybody knows, whether it's the Red Cross, local emergency management, the police, the fire? As you'll see from our scenarios, these people all play into situations where they may need your particular resources for a smaller incident. I'm not talking about the Katrina and Rita and things like that. I'm talking about the smaller, the house fire. Who's going to take care of the animals? How are you going to take care of the animals? And things like that. But how often do you meet trained with the local responders? You're part of their processes. Or identify what resource you bring to the table. Do they know the resources you have? Do they know what you're capable of? Do they know that you can house animals? How many animals? What type of animals? If your shelters are great for dogs and cats, but not real good for snakes and reptiles and frogs and all that, those are your limitations. Part of your job as an agency representative is to explain the limitations you have, what you cannot do, and that you can transport the animals. Yes, we can transport the animals will meet these people at the shelter. You bring that to the table. Those are very big resources when, in fact, people will not leave their animals, and we know that's true. How do you connect with other organizations? Do you connect with local, state? Do you have larger organizations that you're from? Now, where are you all from? I know, but what's, oh, that's not my neck of the woods. Cool. What organization are you with? Oh, Peoria Zoo? Oh, great. Aren't they participating next month? Yeah, next month? Yeah. Excellent. I see your commercial. I'm from Bloomington. I see your commercials all the time. So when's the last time you met with Peoria County and talked to them? And as a zoo, which you guys were in South Carolina, were you? You missed our biggie in South Carolina for all the zoos. But the thing is, you have all the expertise to deal with different animals that a lot of people, not just dogs and cats, but like all those other animals. 'Cause I watch on TV 25 and all that kind of stuff, so we're good. And where are you from?
North here a little bit, up north a little
Okay, I mean, what type of an organization?
bit. Not animal rescue.
Animal rescue, okay. Shelter, okay, so do you have large organizations? What other zoos have you worked with? Have you reached over there at Bloomington, the Miller Park, to share resources and knowledge and expertise and things like that? Have you reached out with the other shelters in the county? Have you reached out to adjoining counties and things like that? Because if a large sun happens, then what will happen is the state will reach out to the counties will then reach out to what they have as resources. And that's how you get pulled in. That's why you want to be like a volunteer on their list for local emergency management. So when you're called in, you may leave your county or your area. You're part of the state response. So let's look at a very simple incident. You're contacted by local emergency management office, police, fire, EMS, doesn't matter. Advise there's been a house fire in your community. The fire has been extinguished, but the house is total loss and family has been displaced. 2 dogs, 1 cat who need shelter. Okay, let's even look at more, maybe they have a little more of an exotic animal. Okay, that you might have, because have all the birds and the little geckos, and that was on last week, I think. So, it's up like, see, I watch TV 25 in the morning before I go to work. Okay, so something like that. What's the one position we always fill? This might be something to remember later too. What's the one position we always fill in the incident command system? Yes, the incident commander. That's one position always there. Okay, for something like this, there's a large house fire. Who's going to be in charge? The fire department, of course. So this is a fire department. Okay, so you have a fire department, and they're going to have, just so we stay in, let's say they have an operations. Okay, and they're going to have the fire department, and they're going to have their different areas, attacking the house from different directions. They may have a water supply set up and all that. They're going to have all that. But under that would be the animal rescue. Very simple. Okay, they have an incident commander. So if you get called for this, you're going to know what? You're going to know you're going. Okay, hopefully you pre-planned. You know what equipment to take with you. And they're going to tell you what I say here, 2 dogs and a cat. So you're going to need like 3 containers. I guess you shouldn't put a dog and a cat in the same container, right? I'm looking at our veterinarian and make sure that's not legit, okay? That's that after lunch trying to keep everybody awake. So you need 3 containers, people moving stuff like that. So if they sit there and say, yes, there's a house fire at such and such, they're going to send you maybe to a staging area. Remember that when I think Matt talked about that? So you could go to a staging area. So you now know that they say, yeah, we'll go to our staging area, and it's at such and such and such and such. You know the staging areas where everybody reports to that you'll have to check in, part of that accountability. I think Matt talked about that. You know you'll have to check in, and then you're ready to go into the response. And they may say, there's the dogs and the cat. You do your thing. You take off and do your thing. Easy enough? Realistic? Go ahead.
Would they let you know, say the dogs are something they can't handle, would they let you know you will need to go into that house and need the
Yep.
equipment for that?
And the best way to make sure you know that is one, you train with them and that you ask that question. They know you're going to ask that question. So you say, yes, we're glad to come out in a situation we can. We just need to know what type of dog it is. Is it aggressive? Is it injured? Things like that. Just tell them what they want to know. And then even I'm a big one for pre-planning. Then you'd have a little check sheet, and so you're not going to remember like at 3 o'clock in the morning or whatever time it was. Okay, they say, okay, dog 2, cat 1. They say, okay, well, it's a snake. We don't take snakes. So you'll have it on a little check sheet. And then you'll have aggressive dog, not aggressive, things like that.
Injured, I would need to take those to
Exactly. Because that ties into, remember I talked about plugging in? Because what would happen is you would then have your checklist, so when they call you, know all this information. And then you know the limits. Because you've trained with them, hopefully they'll have in their little computers, when they call up for your organization, it'll say dogs and cats only. Or no crocodiles or something, whatever it is. So the whole thing is you'll pre-plan that, because those are your capabilities. Because remember, you have capabilities too. Remember we talked about that? That's all you can do. And if it's just dogs and cats, whoops, let me spell it right. Dogs and cats, That's fine, there's nothing wrong with that. Well, do you guys do dogs and cats? But do you guys do other exotic animals, like reptiles? Like snakes? Okay, so in yours, you're going to talk about snakes. Do you do venomous snakes? Well, see, now that's something you want to tell Peoria County. So that's what, and maybe you may have the expertise, maybe you have the experts in reptiles that would understand, well, I can identify that snake, I know what it is, so maybe you'd be a resource. And rather than plug in like this, you'd be a single resource, which would be still working under here, but you'd be a resource. One of your experts would go in and say, yes, that's a such and such a snake, or that's a such and such, and they're not dangerous, blah, blah, blah. And so that's where your resources, that's the resources you guys would bring. Birds, especially with exotic birds or something like that. Yeah, so you need to look at what your capabilities are, and then be sure you communicate your capabilities to local EMA, emergency management, police, fire, EMS. You're going to train with them and talk to them and all that. And then they're going to say, okay, go to staging. They may tell you to go to the ICP, which is your incident command post. You know that's your incident commander is standing at. You know he's the one calling the shots. And it may be the back of a fire engine. Your ICP in a situation like that, more likely is going to be a command car. It's going to be, I know in Peoria, it's going to be the red SUVs. Okay, most fire departments is red or a white SUV, something like that. So you're going to know that's going to be the guy with the back end of an SUV open with the little tables that slide out. Could be something that easy. Okay? But when you go there, they're going to tell you. And you know when they say report to staging or report to our ICP and tell you where it's at, you know what that is. Oh, ICP, that's where the incident commander is at. That's where everything's being called from. Oh, staging, that's where I go in. And as you plan this, they'll tell you this. Staging, that's where I go in, I check in, I'm part of this operation, they send in and things like that. Conceivable incident? Conceivable you'd be called? Do you have a plan for it? Don't answer that, I'm just asking. Okay, but do you have a plan for it? Okay, now I got to figure out where I put that control at. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. Well, you got to be smarter than think. Okay, there's an example. There's all kinds of them in incident commander. How about a PIO? House fire? Is that, you want a PIO? Because if the incident commander doesn't delegate, they have to do it, right? You think at this point the incident commander is going to be busy dealing with the fire? Yeah, is he going to want to talk to the media? Probably not. Do they have a professional public information officer? Probably. You know, your counties and cities are probably going to have it. So you have a PIO, which we know is over here. It's one of the staff positions, okay? Operations section chief. I think somebody talked about, you got a fire department, maybe somebody got hurt, and animal rescue. Conceivable, that's incident command. That's a very simple incident command. Something happens every day, unfortunately, yeah. Okay, let's look at another one, a little more complicated. There's been a large accident on interstate by your town. I know you guys have interstates. Interstates by you, large roads. If you're up in Chicago, you got enough traffic to make this happen, okay? There are multiple cars involved, 2 semi-trucks and a school bus. Is that what we call a pucker factor? You throw a school bus in there? Yeah, everybody gets nervous, okay? So we just thought we'd throw that in for fun. Multiple cars, a couple semi-trucks, and a school bus. The accident, there are 2 fatalities in a semi-truck car carrying newlyweds who are on their honeymoon, okay? School bus was on the way to a football game with a high school football team. The accident truck, is that conceivable? Yeah. Very conceivable. The accident truck driver was arrested for reckless driving. 10 people have been hurt in addition to 2 fatalities. The interstate is shut down, traffic backing up for miles. Is that realistic? Yeah, that's realistic. Inside a semi-truck is a large German Shepherd that appears to be vicious, preventing anyone from entering the truck cab. Ouch! Who asked about vicious a few minutes ago? Yeah, yeah. Now think about that, large German Shepherd, and is it unusual for truck drivers to have a dog or cat or other animal? No, it's not unusual at all. So, you have that. One of the vehicles involved is a van route to the annual Westminster Dog Show. Realistic? Yeah, now do they get serious about their dogs going to Westminster Dog Show? Yeah, I mean usually the people get serious when they come over to Bloomington Normal for dog shows. They get very serious about it. Dog owner was seriously injured and conscious when transferred to hospital. What would this ICS organization look like? A little more complicated. Okay, so as we start, what's the one position you're always going to fill? The IC, right. You want to teach us? I mean, you can teach us. Okay, you got it all. Okay, good deal. All right, so what are the 3 staff positions? What are the 3 staff positions? There's 3 of them. PIO, liaison, safety. So in this one, would you want a PIO? Oh yeah, oh yeah. So you're going to put a PIO in here. How about a safety officer? Yeah, probably, especially because you've got vehicles involved, possible hazardous materials, gasoline and all that. So you want to put a safety officer in here. Okay, the other one's a liaison. The person's going to work with all these other agencies coming and stuff like that. If the IC doesn't want to do it, he has to delegate, otherwise he's got to do it. Do you think the IC is going to want to deal with all the agencies coming in? You got the coroner, you got the police, you got the fire. You think the IC is going to have time to deal with all that? No, probably not. So, you want a liaison. Okay? Are you with me so far? Okay, so, in this situation, what's the first one? Which group deals with the tactical parts? Operations, very good. So, under ops, who's going to be under ops in this one? What types of organizations? Well, obviously, the fire. You want the police out there? Okay, you got the PD. Who else do you want out there? You got injuries, fatalities. Coroner. Who else is going to deal with the injuries? EMS. Who else? Well, you got a vicious German Shepherd and you got the expensive Westminster dog. Animal shelter. I call it animal rescue. Because we're doing plural, then you're doing, it's instead of animal shelter, it's AS something else. So I call it animal rescue. They woke up. I'm glad to hear that. All right, so who else is going to be out there? What other groups are involved here? Have you got a school bus? So you went to school? I would. They got all kinds of information on those kids with the school bus and all that. So that pretty well, that's a good start, right? For something like this, do you think it'll go beyond one operational cycle? Or beyond like 6 or 7 hours for something like this? It could. It could. So would you want to set up a what section? Who deals with planning for future operational periods? Very good. So plans is set up. Okay, who else? You got to have your stuff. You got to get all the stuff. So you want logistics. Okay, what's the other one? What's the last one of the general staff positions? Yep, finance and administration. Now, finance and, what's that? Well, good question. Finance administration. As far as the response, vendor contracts, legal issues, workman's comp, time cards, are pretty much what the agencies handle that themselves. The individual response agencies that are responding, these here. It can go either way. Like I said, there's no perfect solution. You could stand that up, or they could just deal with it by themselves. Down in our neck of the woods, probably they would deal with it themselves. So, but you by all means could stand up if you need. Remember, incident command is modular, expands or contracts based on need of the operations. Okay, so you could make that. And then you'd have break these downs into task force and strike teams and single resources and all the other units that whoever showed you, somebody showed you. Okay, so what do you think? Well, let's see. We got the incident commander. This is in Keith's little world. That's how these came up. Got the public information officer, safety officer, liaison, operations. I just had logistics, fire, EMS, animal rescue, coroner, police, animal control, schools. Realistic scenario? Now, think about somebody, and I don't think either of you are old enough to remember this incident. Remember we had somebody driving through Bloomington and their little white tiger escaped out of the back of their truck because they were illegally transporting it? You remember that? Yeah. So yeah, is that realistic? On 74, east to west? Yeah, it's pretty realistic. What if they had other exotic animals? You think local animal control knows how to deal with, I don't know, an alligator? Certain types of birds, certain species? Yeah. So it's realistic, so something can easily happen. Questions?